There are a few things that will make me click on a video faster. Usually it has to be a combination of things that really create a perfect storm of me being like, what's this now? For me today, the one that really caught my eye is I was looking to see if there's anything fun going on with Jordan Peterson. And now his channel is nothing but a bunch of really boring long form podcasts. There is some funny shit that he says in them. It is pretty great. But it's a lot to want to go through those just to find the gems. But then I saw that he has a clips channel. And there's stuff from, like, yes, we were recording this. There's stuff from when he was a teacher and some of his lectures all the way through. And then I found this one, and I'd never heard of this before. He talks to some dude, this guy, whoever this is, about Star Wars and atheist nerds. Jordan Peterson, Star Wars atheism. Ooh, boy. Let's fucking go. I should probably unmute this computer. That'd probably be a good idea. Let's go.
I take your reading of Christianity to be, for example, compatible with Star Wars, in the sense that Luke Skywalker is a very quirky, odd guy, you know,
like all those quirky odd guys in the Bible, of course,
in the middle of this random planet,
of course,
who's, you know, I mean, just as weird and odd as a carpenter in Galilee, right? You know, and
Luke Skywalker was what made Luke Skywalker awkward? He was just a teenager. He wanted to go hang out with his friends and hang out at the Tashi station and get some power converters, which, by the way, is slang for drugs. Okay? And he liked to fly in that T-31 or some shit like that? He was a hot rodder. He wasn't a quirky, nerdy guy. He was a jock. Luke was a fucking jock. Luke was doing dope and fucking cruising around in his flying hot rod. You guys are projecting so much right now. But then also, Jesus was quirky and nerdy? Really?
And yet he is the embodiment of this kind of eternal spiritual thing, you know, and that's where you get that kind of melding together.
Right. In Star Wars, we should just look at it historically. Star Wars, George Lucas, Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung, because all of Campbell's thinking was Jungian thinking, all of it. And The Hero with a Thousand Faces is a great book, especially as an introduction to that kind of literature. But yeah, Star Wars is Christianity for atheist nerds.
Star Wars is Christianity for atheist nerds. I really want to hear how he defines this.
Yes.
Fundamentally, yeah.
Yes,
and you can't get rid of that. There's no getting rid of that, right? If you throw it out in one direction, it comes back in another. And that's something we should talk about too.
Well, it's a very powerful story. Yeah, no, absolutely. The one thing I would want to say, though, is that we are most happy when we do not perceive ourselves as inheriting an archetypal story from somebody else.
Okay, that's not true at all. That's not even remotely true at all. There's a lot of pride and happiness that people get from following certain types of tradition that do fall into the archetypal, obnoxious dog shit that Jordan's always talking about. But I really want to know, is Luke supposed to be Jesus? And, like, you know, George Lucas and him wanting Anakin to be Jesus, but that wouldn't work out very well. I want to know what they're fucking talking about. How in the fuck is Christianity like Star Wars or vice versa?
If I were to say to you, you know, here's the archetypal story, you're going to end up back there, you know, that would be disinteresting to us emotionally. You know, we want to tell our own stories. We want to be particular in ourselves. I would also say that...
No, we don't. We just repeat the same shit all the time. I mean, it's great when new stuff comes along, but let's be honest about, like, what people in general enjoy. Nah, come on.
Even though human psychology has remained relatively constant for at least 300,000 years and parts of it for over a million...
No, that is absolutely ridiculously not true. What the fuck? What? Unless you're talking about like the base brain structures, sure. But the brain is a dynamic thing, you know, like, and the organization and number of dendrites in your own neurology changes wildly depending on your environment. So this kid doesn't fucking know anything about psychology or neurology. What the fuck?
Our world is changing. and has changed. And there are real differences between the way the world works now, the kinds of actions and behaviors that are going to function now than there was even 500 years ago. And so there is this need for flexibility in narrative. So even as what you're talking about, I think, Jordan, is this fundamental spiritual component of narrative, the way in which narrative can connect us with the eternal, a sense of things bigger than ourselves, and that transcendent sense of purpose is what lifts us. But narrative also has this flexibility outside the spiritual, in the material world, to say, okay, how do I navigate this challenge? I'm not going to navigate this challenge as Luke Skywalker or Christ, because Luke Skywalker and Christ didn't encounter it.
Okay, I don't.
Okay, okay, it was a long way. That was a very long and complicated way of him saying, like, you might have a situation that Jesus and Luke didn't experience, so you can't base what you should do on Jesus or Luke. Probably a good idea.
I don't think it's abstracted outside of the spiritual. I think this relates to the issue of the relationship between the conscious propositions and the unconscious understructure. So I think that we think in stories, we frame the world in stories, we see in stories. And this is partly why, for example...
That's stupid, and no, that's not true. That's not even fucking true. Is our experiences colored by some of the media, and because he uses stories for everything, but what he's talking about is like traditionalism and media. So okay, yeah, it colors some of it, sure, but whatever.
Our eyes are adapted with the whites of our eyes so that other people can see our eyes. It's really important for us to see other people's eyes because we can see where they're...
We developed the whites of our eyes so we could see each other's eyes.
Pointing their eyes. And if we can see where they're pointing their eyes, we can see what they're interested in. We can see what they value.
Yeah, I don't think any of that's true. I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but that sounds really fucking dumb. I'm sure there's a much more important reason that we have whites of our eyes.
And we can instantly infer their motivation. And that makes them predictable. And and it's so important that all of our ancestors whose eyes weren't that visible either didn't mate or got killed.
What in the fuck? How do you know? Because I gotta be honest with you here, Jordan. Your eyes don't survive fossilization. Okay? This sounds so completely make-believe, so completely pulled out of his ass. This is so weird.
It's real.
Unless I'm missing something, unless I might be. I'm always allowing for the possibility that I might be completely wrong. Maybe there is some component that proto-humans did not all have the whites of the sclera of their eyes. You know, there was a different color or something.
Really important. Okay, so we have... Now, this shared narrative...
Oh, yeah, and what does this have to do with Star Wars and Jesus? Nothing.
So imagine, this perhaps relates to the particular and the absolute. As you specify the narrative for small-scale actions, and those would be particularized, the connection with the absolute, the larger absolute, in some sense falls away, but it's nested. So you could say, if you're an integrated person, it's nested. It's so like, right now you're you're listening to me, and sometimes you're talking to me. Okay, so, and the story there is, well, we want to have an engaging conversation. And why? Well, there's a bigger story outside of that, because we want to further our knowledge about narrative, and we want to share that with other people.
God. What he's trying to say is that because the whites of our eyes are far more prominent than other animals, because of a lot of our nonverbal communication is done with eye contact and movement, it's harder to track without whites. Don't quote me since I'm not an expert. Yeah. No, I get that. But the thing is and you know, and I appreciate that. But what's so interesting about this is there are so many more reasons why our eyes are the shape that they are that have nothing to do with understanding empathy. Animals are vastly less facially expressive than we are. Yet, animals can have, depending on the animal, wildly complicated body language that makes up for it, and they are able to communicate in ways we'll never be able to understand. To narrow it down to be like, obviously you had to come down to the whites of the eyes. I doubt it. I fucking doubt it. I don't think Proto-Man was like, I can't really easily tell if he is hungry or gassy or having deep, complicated, interconnected thoughts with the grand universe and the unified field theory and the blah, blah. I don't fucking think so. I think there are much better reasons to consider why our eyes turn out the way they are. But again, I could be wrong. What he just was talking about here is he has not yet said his point. He's describing that he's having a conversation with this guy right now and then questioning the bigger reason why they're having this conversation. And this is the most insufferable brain drain shit.
And then there's a story outside of that, which is, well, why? Well, because we're both educators and public communicators.
Oh, we're all fucked.
Well, why bother with that? Well, because we think education, rationality, and narrative are important for the proper functioning of human beings. Well, why is that relevant? Because we care about the emotional experience of people, and we want to further their growth because we want things to be better. And what's outside of that?
That's a very assuming answer. I don't think that most people think about it that way. There's a larger reason. I want to see if he's going to nail it.
Well, the idea that, well, it's something like the idea that truthful and engaged exploration is a high value. And then outside of that, well, at some point you get to the ultimate abstraction, right? Which is the ultimate good. And if you're an integrated person...
And what would that be? What is the ultimate good? What is the ultimate good? Because the thing is that like Jordan, when he starts going out further and further, he doesn't simplify, because that is how things work. The further you get out, the more simple it is. And the deeper in, the more you're going to have nuances when you're talking in the abstract of a situation. He never actually gets to basic fundamentals. Why do we want good things? Good things are good for the species. Well, why do we care about that? Because we want our species to continue. Done. Because the first impulse of any biological organism is to make sure that a species continues. That's it. Boom. Done. Mic drop. That's it. That's all you have to fucking say. But he can't fucking say it. It's all about the greater overall ecstatic good and blah, blah, blah. No, dude, fuck off. This is biology. This is nature.
The particular of your action is associated with that broad scale abstraction, but you don't have to refer to it in the moment. And thank God for that. Because it would be overwhelming. It would be overwhelming. Here's...
Oh, fuck, he's going to cry.
Something I'll throw out just sort of sideways. I think what happens when people take psychedelic substances that blow apart their latent inhibition is that they start to become cognizant of those underlying nested structures. Like they start...
Oh, people start seeing the archetypes of the world if they trip really hard. Fuck off, dude.
Start to invade the current reality, and that's what makes it saturated with meaning and pregnant with meaning. And also sometimes...
Oh, that's good. If Star Wars wasn't about Jesus, how come there's a book of Luke in the Bible? Good. Yeah, that's good.
Produces that catastrophically terrible experience, because if that nesting is fragmented, so maybe there's part of you that's motivated by bitterness and despair and jealousy. There's a war at the broader narrative levels, and you're a disintegrated character.
So, like, I don't know. I have to recommend, if you're kind of lost on this, go watch the episode of Jordan Peterson on the channel Some More News. It's very long, but it explains that he is so invested in this theory of archetypal structures in society and in people and in nature and in everything that has no basis and is repeatedly debunked. He is so invested in it, he sees everything through that fucking lens. And that's why he sounds like a fucking idiot all the time, because he's talking bullshit. That's why.
And that's extraordinarily stressful physiologically, partly because you can't act out the contradictions, without running into trouble. So, but see, part of what you're doing in psychotherapy all the time, and this is like an integration of cognitive behavioral and analytic psychology, is you're trying to hammer the person's narrative into a single non-contradictory functional unit at all levels of apprehension simultaneously.
No, that is not. If that's what you're doing, then you're being abusive. As we all know, you can always do the same exact thing for everybody else when you're dealing with their mental situation. Blah, blah, blah. Fuck off.
The stories can help with that. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's actually a chapter in the book where I talk about how literature can give you the positives of psychedelics without the negatives. And there's a lot of evidence that literature, particularly certain types of poetry, can deeply stimulate the visual cortex.
Okay. Is this nerd trying to tell me that we can get high by reading? Because you can't. No. You can have a deeply profound psychoactive experience from reading. Sure. It's very context dependent. You can't just be like, yo, bro, yeah, read some of this Robert Frost. It's going to fuck you up. No, I'm sorry, dude.
And create these feelings of awe and pop that sort of allow you to open your mind and start to put together some of the different narratives, different stories you have.
This dude has never done LSD. He's never eaten mushrooms. He has no fucking idea what he's talking about.
And yeah, absolutely.
So is that more effective? Is that more effective when the lyrics are set to music?
Yes.
So has that been demonstrated neurologically? Do you know?
Well, I don't know. I don't know about. I don't know a specific test that has set the poems that I've talked about.
So he just made it up. Okay.
To music, but yes, absolutely. Music has the same, can have the same convergent function. Absolutely, yeah.
No. No. There's been some experiments in certain type of sound waves and stimulating very profound and interesting psychoactive effects. That has been done. I've listened to it. It's not a profound experience. Maybe if you were in a sensory deprivation tank and that's all you had, maybe that might be more. But again, it's context dependent. Also, it doesn't really sound quite like music, and there are no lyrics.
And as far as the therapeutics go, I mean, a lot of the work that I do a lot of work with veterans, a lot of work with trauma survivors. There's no question. I mean, the origins of Greek tragedy are therapeutic. It was written largely, initially by veterans, performed largely for veterans in ancient Athens. And when you take out the story components of Oedipus and you use them in modern military settings, they continue to have these cathartic effects because they continue to allow soldiers to access these deep and dangerous parts of themselves and of the world. I mean, the thing that...
This is fucking idiotic. This is absolutely fucking idiotic. What the fuck? Like, hey, I know you're dealing with some pretty heavy stress as a soldier, so we're gonna listen to Oedipus on book on tape. Okay. Sure.
What happens in war is you get tragic knowledge of the world and of yourself.
Sometimes malevolent knowledge, which is even worse. Like the people I've seen who were traumatized were not so much traumatized by tragedy as they were traumatized by malevolence, because that's the voluntary imposition of tragedy. And there's something about, and so one of the things you see with soldiers is that
the only people who say shit like that are people who have never really had to deal with somebody who has deep PTSD. It's Jesus fucking Christ, dude. It is so much more complicated than that. And so much simpler, too.
Often when they get traumatized, it's...
Are you saying Oedipus is played for ancient Athenian soldiers on book on tape? Oh, okay.
Not because something terrible happened to them. It's because they watched themselves do something so terrible they can't imagine being human and having done that.
Okay. 100% from somebody who has family members that saw combat and has 3 very close friends who saw direct combat recently. Fuck off. Fuck you. What an absolute shit-headed fucking thing to say. What a fucking prick. Yeah, I know. They clickbaited it with Star Wars and atheist nerds. They talked about it for like 30 seconds, and now Jordan Peterson is shoving a fist in his own asshole.
So one of the things Jung pointed out, for example, when he was dealing with people who were extraordinarily traumatized, was that helping people understand the battle between good and evil, let's say, so that's a narrative at the highest level of abstraction, is to understand that, because imagine what would happen if you, in some sense, had to take personal responsibility for your own malevolence. And you got a glimpse of that, right? A glimpse of that murderous malevolence that you're capable of. And you have no place to put it. Well, if you can put it in a universal narrative, you can say, well, these powerful forces of good and evil are always operating beneath the surface. And that's been the case for the entire corpus of human history. And God only knows what it means in the final analysis. But it's possible for an individual to be caught up in that. And that's not an excuse, right? But if you've done something terrible, and you need to recover, you need a story to put that in, because otherwise it just hangs. It's like the sword of Damocles over your head all the time. Who the hell am I? I'm capable of that sort of thing. Who the hell am I? And
an idiot. Yeah, this is very strange. If you've seen yourself act in true malevolence, you need to put that feeling of evil into a story. What the fuck?
And you can't live without an answer to that question.
No, and I think also I will say, to move the conversation, not just veterans, I think all of us do things in our lives that we're ashamed of, and that we wonder where that comes from, and then we have to square with our own experience.
It comes from us. We are not perfect beings. We fuck up.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, one thing I'll say is at the bottom of my worldview is Darwin, not Jung. So I myself don't subscribe. I'm an agnostic. I don't subscribe to strict good and evil. I mean, I subscribe to pain and joy, or something like that. And so a lot of what
that's at the propositional level, but you still admire Star Wars.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God. All right. Well, anyway, yes, this was supposed to be about Star Wars. And it ended up being two nerds who don't know what the fuck they're talking about, saying absolutely fucking nothing. All right, well, you're welcome. I just wasted 20 minutes of your time. Oh, my God.